Hello, everybody. I am so glad everyone is here with us, and we're waiting on a couple more people who we are hoping will pop in, which will be awesome. We will welcome them when they arrive. If anyone is watching, I know that Andrew Schulman was going to be watching, and several others who may be watching via the live stream. Please tweet to the hashtag creating the future. That's the only place we're watching. Otherwise, we're watching right here on the screen. And so if you will tweet and just please chime in as if you're in the room, because we would love to hear what you're thinking about, what's popping for you, and introduce yourself. So welcome everybody. I am Hildy Gottlieb with Creating the Future. It is joyful to be here with you all, see everybody's smiling faces. Let's go around, and if you will just say your name, where you are located, and briefly something that is exciting in your life these days. And I am going to start to my left with my friend Ann Vermel. Tell us who you are, where you are, and what is exciting with you these days.
I'm Ann Vermel, and I'm in Fort Collins, Colorado. And what is exciting is that I moved here 6 months ago, and now it's where I live. And everything is popping. It's very exciting.
Yay, yay, yay. Awesome. Peter.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Peter Panapento. I'm in Columbia, Maryland. I'm excited about two things. One, my old former Lemoyne College classmate, by a year off, Christina Mancini is on this call, which is awesome. Also really excited to drive this conversation forward. We've been talking about so much of this for months now, Hildy, and it's great to be able to get to a point where we're brainstorming ideas on how we can actually spin this forward.
Yep, I know that's part of my excitement too. Beatriz.
Hi, I'm Beatriz Paniego Bejar. I am located in DC. I just moved here 10 months ago. Also very excited about that move, this conversation, and especially the holidays coming, because I'm gonna go back home. Home is in Spain, so I am so looking forward to that.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. And Christina.
Hi, Christina Mancini. I'm located in Rochester, New York. Very excited to be part of this. I've enjoyed reading the pieces from the past. I know I'm coming in well into the process, but I think it's a pretty great one. So I'm looking forward to learning more and participating.
Wonderful, wonderful. And Dimitri, I will hand this over to you.
Yes, for new people in the room, because we are like literally right next to each other, we have to turn the mics on and off. Otherwise, you get reverb. So that was the passing of the mic baton to me, the talking stick, so to speak. I'm Dimitri Petropoulos in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm excited about this meeting more than anything else, to see everyone, and also because I do all the back end stuff, to make sure it all works. So I'm excited that, oh, look, it popped up on the website. Yay, it's working. So.
Awesome. And I am Hildy Gottlieb. I am also in Tucson, Arizona, about 6 feet away from the guy who just spoke. I'm excited about today. I'm excited about where this process has gone. I am also excited about the holidays. We are going to be baking up a storm this weekend. Dimitri makes baklava, which is always, we bring it to all our friends. Sometimes we send it in the mail. So Anne's face just lit up. It's been one of those weeks around here that has been, I don't know what led me to think it was a good idea to pile every one of my meetings into this week. But it has actually been kind of fun, because I'm bouncing from good thing to good thing to good thing. And that's been pretty awesome. After yesterday's meeting, had a delightful 2-hour conversation with some colleagues here in town about doing something fun and awesome. And so, yeah, it's been that kind of week that the energy is just really, really nice, really nice. And I see Kashana is close to joining us.
I'm here. I just didn't turn on my, my video just yet.
We will.
I'm here.
Okie dokie. Well, what we are doing, Kishana, is we are going around the room and introducing ourselves. Just say who you are, where you're located, and something that's exciting in your life these days. And you're up.
Awesome. Well, hi, everyone. I am Kashana Palmer. I am in New York City, and something exciting that's happening in my life. Oh, Lord. I'm sending my child to her father next week, Friday, for 2 weeks.
Oh,
This solo mama is getting a much deserved break. I mean, the child is a joy, but having a teenager that you have to recreate, who is not quite at the stage yet where we can trust all the movements, I think is more work than when she was a toddler and I was scheduling her play dates.
yeah, it's really interesting, and we all experience it as your parents, that you think that by the time they're 11, 12, 13, 14, a little bit more autonomous, that your work will be lighter, and it's not.
Hi.
It's not.
Okay.
It's not.
Yeah, no, it is totally not. It is not easier yet. And she is craving more of the independence. So it's an interesting battle. But I'm super excited just in the work phase to be wrapping up a really, really tough strategic plan. One of the decisions that I made for my business going into 2020 is where I'm planning to scale down what I'm doing so that I can make space out. And one of those things, can you hear me?
Yeah, you blipped for a little
Oh,
bit,
hold
but
on.
you're good
I don't
now.
know what just happened. Give me 1 second.
You're back. You're back.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. And we can see you.
I will. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good. Yep.
All right. Good.
We
we're
are.
back.
We are all good.
But I can't hear y'all, but it's okay. So one of the things that I realized is that I do not love strategic planning.
Ooh.
I know, right? And that's a big deal. It's a lot of our bread and butter, but I don't love it. And I took on a project because I really liked the executive director. And literally a week into it, I realized like, but this is why I don't do them anymore. And so it has been a very painful process for this organization and for me. And I just realized it's just not worth it. And so am sort of redoing some things on my site and all of my narratives so that I can just pass them along to my consultant friends who actually really enjoy the work and are probably way better at it than I am.
Wow, these are big things. These are
Absolutely.
big, big things. So one of the things that I'm excited about in this particular room right at this moment is that several of us are members of a online community for consultants on Facebook and have never met face to face even like this. So Christina and Kishana, Anne is in the group. I don't know if you're in that group, Beatrice. I don't know if I've seen you there, but and you're not really doing consulting. So yeah.
I think I am in it, but yeah, I'm not active at all.
Right. And so it's just sort of, it's always fun to have faces that aren't those teeny tiny little avatars in the corner.
Yeah.
Faces that actually move. So this is pretty awesome. And Andrew, if you are out there, if anyone is out in the Twitterverse, and you'd like to tell us who you are and where you are and what's exciting with you, we would like to hear that as well. So let's get started. We are, as Christina had mentioned, we're sort of at the end of what has been a long process, which is very exciting. I thought it might help to just bring us all into the same room together and in the space, in the headspace, sort of the real goal of our communicating and engaging is creating the future's mission. Our real goal is that we accomplish the mission. And the mission is that people know how to change the systems they find themselves in so that those systems are bringing out the best in people. And it was just so interesting yesterday, the meeting that I had after this was a 2-hour conversation about a 2,000 employee organization that all of their systems are not bringing out the best in them. Their systems are not bringing out. I am hearing an echo. There we go. Okay. And so there's so many systems that we all encounter that are not bringing out the best in us. What does it take for those systems to bring out the best in people? And that's really our goal of communicating, of engaging, is that it contributes to accomplishing the mission. If there are specific projects we're doing or work we're taking on as demonstration projects that fit into that, the communications might include that, but mostly we want people to have that sense, and we've talked so much about that over the past several meetings, that sense of agency, that sense of hope, that sense of what's possible, knowing what they can do, knowing what they can create. And so the fun part about today is we get to start brainstorming activities, which is always the place that everybody wants to go. Our brains are wired for that. Our brains are wired for do, let's do. What you will have seen in the last two, the one that we posted yesterday and the one that we posted of the meeting before, is really all of the dominoes that these activities need to topple down. If we're going to get to the goal, what do those dominoes look like? And all we really have control over is that first domino that we knock down. And we hope that it knocks down all the others, that it creates that what our messages are doing is creating the conditions to realize our mission. And so a lot of what we talked about was that our activities, our communication, our engagement activities need to do everything from help people see possibilities, help people feel included and safe to try something new, that our messages be about the people reading the message, not about us, that the thinking is really about what do they need to hear, what do they need to know, what do they need to experience in order to step into what's possible. Giving folks hope, providing examples and stories, helping people move beyond scarcity. The meeting before this last one was a lot of conversation about what does it take to help people move beyond scarcity and silos to move to together and enough, which was a very enlivening conversation. And really, what does it take? Activities that help people see that each of us can change the systems we find ourselves in, simply by the questions that we ask. So today is what activities can we do that will accomplish that? And I thought it might be helpful to just pull up a screen of where we are in the catalytic thinking framework right now, so that everybody is on the same page. All righty, let's move that to this. No, come on, move over here. Hate when it does that. There we go. Okay. We have done a lot of conversation about all of these. Who will hear our messages? Whether they are our intended target audience or not, people are going to hear those messages. We want to make sure that the message aligns with what they need, and isn't just targeted to one tiny little population, so that we're ignoring everybody else who will hear those messages, whether we want them to or not, whether they are our target audience or not. We talked about what is possible, what good would look like for them. We spent a lot of time backing out, okay, what are the favorable conditions that will lead to those results? And we're right now in the fun place of saying, okay, what actions, what activities, what tactics will create those conditions, and what do we need to have in order to do that? So I am going to say, let's just dive in. Pick any of these that are exciting to you, whether it is stories, whether it is helping people see possibilities. What kinds of ideas and tactics occur to you as you've been thinking about this that will help create that?
Hildy?
Yes, sir.
I just want to mention as we get into this, remind people who may be watching this online to tweet with the hashtag creating the future. I'm keeping an eye on the tweet stream. comments, questions, whatever, will be incorporated into this conversation. So I just wanted to mention this as we get into the
Okay.
meeting. So to speak.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Andrew just tweeted, Andrew Schulman, I'm here in LA and excited to be here with you all. And Andrew is another one who you all will recognize if you are in the consultants group on Facebook. Andrew is active there as well. So we're happy to have you here. What's popping for you all in terms of thoughts of, what can we do?
One thing I want to bring up as we talk about this and talk about the activities and actions and what tactics we want to use is kind of thinking about this through what we want a communication strategy for this to look like, which isn't a one-way communication. This is really as much an engagement strategy as it is a communication strategy. The success of this that I see is if we can be the starting point for larger conversations that happen that we may not even know about or be part of, where we're kind of getting people to kind of become their own, kind of to pick up and run with a lot of this and take it in new directions with the work that they're doing and what they're trying to achieve.
I love that. I love that. One of the things that we've always said, people have always asked us, how will you know if you've accomplished your mission? That's always the question. How will you know? And our answer is we probably won't, which is not what people want to hear, but that it's exactly what you just said, Peter, that we will be successful when people we've never met are having different kinds of conversations with other people we've never met. So I love that. So what sparks for folks when it comes to those kinds of things, being the starting point for that conversation?
Something you said, Peter, kind of resonates with me. I've been thinking about this as someone who's been observing the cultural scene for a long time, and I don't mean arts, I just mean the culture. And in the United States, in the 60s and in the 70s, we began to see this intense move towards a spiritual renewal. And it became all sorts of things, from Tao to Buddhism to anything. But what happened was that gradually, and we're now in 2019, gradually it becomes totally normal for you to have someone say, "Oh, she's a Buddhist," and you just think, "Oh, fine. I know now I can expect compassion and love. Terrific, And but I think that what we're looking at is a process that happened in a huge number of different ways, not least of which was the Beatles, who went off to India and came back, changed the culture. And I think that we're looking at a process that is extreme. It has all sorts of breadth to it and just insanely creative ways to move forward. So that was my thought.
So we need to be the Beatles.
No, but we need to find the Beatles.
I mean, I'm happy to be the Beatles.
Oh, you'll be very good at it too. But what I'm saying is we need to find the Beatles and have them start talking.
I get it. So really the Beatles in current social media lexicon were the influencers.
They were an influencer. So was Susan Sontag.
Mm-hmm.
So was the Maharaj, so was Transcendental Meditation.
Right.
All of these things happened and they became, they had spin-offs. Meditation, Transcendentalism spun off to Werner Erhard, which spun off to Common Sense, which spun off to something else. And all of that was tied to a search for spirituality. And we're not unlike that. We're looking for something that is very deeply spiritual in its essence. So
it's about bringing out the best in people. So yeah. Well, and So the kinds of activities that connect with influencers.
That's basically it. Yes, you always sum it up in 2 words. It's great.
That's okay. That's okay.
But I still say find the Beatles.
So-
Well, some of them are hard to find right now. Go ahead.
I know that I am coming into this later, but I'm just curious, in terms of generations, have you been working with millennials or Gen Zers, iGen at all? Because I have a son I have 2 sons who are Generation Z, and so much of what you've been working on and what is so important to really changing the world one thing at a time is really systemic, I'm noticing with my kids and with that generation. So I'm just curious what level of participation, if any, has been through that group.
There is considerable participation among millennials, not a lot in kids who are younger. But that it's a really, really good point. Because one of the things that they're doing is they're having conversations, and they're having these conversations. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes they don't stop having the conversations. If I get my son started on it, it goes for hours. But I'm proud of that.
I was going to say, you're raising them good. Yeah. Yeah, we have often talked about the power of people learning to have conversations and ask questions that bring out the best in each other, that bring out the best in situations, that reach for what's possible beyond what sort of in the realm of what everybody has always said is unrealistic and Pollyanna-ish. And that the reality is that nothing amazing that's ever happened, everything amazing that has ever happened has happened because somebody reached into what is Pollyanna-ish. And what we've often talked about is the power of not having to unlearn old ways and having kids learn these ways of being early on, so they don't have to unlearn as those of us who are older have to do. So yeah,
You know, I think
let me give you the
sort of keying off of that for a second, I think there's also a change in expectation. So there's an opportunity to create new expectations. The expectations previous generations have had on what life is going to be like was pretty much the same, or a little incrementally along the same path, better along the same path. And I think that many, through a variety of reasons, whether true or not, the expectations are very different, and they're shifting. So that creates an opportunity, I think, to fuel new expectations, which is part of assumptions, which is part of actions, which is part of results. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of the opportunity that creates. Keyed off the comment that you made, Christina, you know, that there's these conversations going on. I remember having conversations when I was that age, and you know, change the world and do all these other things, which is what Anne was talking about, because that's what the expectation was at the time. So I'm kind of excited as to what possibility that creates.
I am too. I mean, I've been working with some millennials and some new post millennials recently, and they are looking at a world that is teetering on the verge of disaster, and they are looking for ways to survive in that, and in ways to create in that, and I think that the whole essence of hope that we are able to offer for, and the fact that there is opportunity. I've just been reading the book, The Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, talking about joy in troubled times. And I think that's really what we're saying is you can do this, it can happen. And here's a tool.
So I want to get back to Peter's observation about what activities can we undertake that spark conversation. What are the kinds of activities that can spark that kind of conversation?
don't know if I have an activity, but like what I'm thinking, hearing you guys is thinking about normalizing things that are not normalized now. And I'm thinking about some examples that I'm having with when I have conversations, for example, with my mother, living in such a different country with, and especially right now in DC, I can see the big difference between where I used to live in Sarasota, Florida, and right now, like the ways that people act and things that are normalized here that are not in Spain or are not in Florida. And how, for me, it's been a little bit of a shock. I'm more, I guess I'm more ready to accept those things that are different. But for me to explain it to other people that are not used to live on that world, it's difficult. And so what I realize is that maybe one activity is getting people that come from such different backgrounds and just share and realize that, you know, at the end of the day, we are all humans, but that we have different ways of living and being able to see that way of living from somebody else's eyes or perspective.
So what kinds of activities can help people see through other people's eyes? We've talked a lot about stories. A lot of what I have been doing, I will confess, I so seriously dislike Facebook for 9 million reasons. And I am there because I have to be, because people are there. And so I have chosen, and one of these days I will go through and cull my page to pull all my personal stuff off. I have chosen to make my page primarily a place for discussing issues of primarily racial equity, but also class equity. And what I find over and over again is the power of stories, of hearing stories, but it's not just click and share. It is really more of what you're talking about, Peter, of having that story. Well, and it's also when we, the culture in the consultants group that many of you are part of, we ask people not to post what we affectionately call hit and run links, where you just click on a link and say, this is interesting, and you move on. And to post why you think it's interesting, to spark conversation. And so I think that there's a piece there in terms of activities, just in terms of social media, to be sharing stories that do bring up what is it like to live in X way. So it could be, what is it like to live in poverty? What is it like to live the normal life of a normal person of color who suddenly comes up against a system that says, yeah, we don't like you. What is it like to be that? To just as you said, Beatrice, to put on somebody else's shoes. And I think that it's not just sharing on social media, but what is it really very intentionally creating conversation in those spaces.
I think that's one activity that could be actually formalized and made international, and would be very interesting to see what happened.
Yeah.
And a list of questions that start with what you were just saying. What is it like to be you? What is it like to live with this? And the other thing, the simplest thing in the world is living room conversations. I mean, just intentionally sitting down and saying, I want to have a conversation about this because it's a question I want to explore. And
so maybe feeding the questions so that people have them when they're at their dinner table or their living room or wherever, so that they have ways of entering the conversation that doesn't that does inform where they want to go, and also maybe tools for how to answer responses to those questions.
So there's an interesting model for that. It's a great idea. I don't know if any of you are familiar with On the Table. It's a it started in Chicago by the Chicago Community Trust, and a number of other community foundations do it. They essentially designate a day where people in their community are invited to have gatherings in their backyards, at a park, whatever. And they usually are given a framework of questions or topics to discuss, so that neighbors and different people kind of come together and learn each other's perspectives about important problems. There could be a way to either replicate or plug into or partner with that model as a way to think about how to do that, some of this.
Peter, the name of that again?
It's called On the Table.
And is this an organization that's running this? What is the?
So it's run in a lot of different cities and communities across the country, mostly by local community foundations. So the Chicago Community Trust started this probably about 8 to 10 years ago in Chicago. And a lot of other community foundations have adopted that model. And the Knight Foundation has actually been funding some community conversations around that model too.
Wow. Yeah.
That sounds great.
And when we talk about what Chicago did this year was they have a new mayor that was coming in, and they actually had each of these on the table conversations develop a memo to the mayor about what they would like to see handled and addressed there. So that kind of campaign or effort, I think, could be really valuable for us.
Well, and Andrew just tweeted, if we're talking blue sky here, one way to spark conversation among lots of people is a really good advertising campaign, be it online, on billboards, TV even. I generally don't love advertising, but for this purpose, it's hard to beat if done well. And I'm really, really glad that you mentioned that, Andrew, because the thought that I've had recently is that some of what we've come to ignore, especially with the rise of social media, is the fact that people still drive in their cars. They still listen to the radio and they still see billboards. And there's something there about helping people. And I've thought about it as I've thought about it as a way to actually cut through the noise, that it's a very level playing field if everybody drives in their car. And it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. It doesn't matter, what you believe, what color you are, you're all in your cars. And I think that there's something there, whether it's a question, whether it's a, but there's something, one of the things that I was thinking as you were talking, Beatrice, about normalizing is making, what I scribbled down was make these conversations ubiquitous, that you're hearing it and seeing it everywhere. We were talking yesterday and Sue Kindred was saying, in the old days, we used to say that it takes 7 messages before somebody hears something. And now it's, 17 or 20 or whatever, because there is so much noise. Being in a lot of different places where people will see and hear conversations, I think that's an important piece.
Yeah.
And now that you're, sorry, Anne, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
I was just thinking about what you said, Hildy, about people still being in their cars and listening to the radio, but also the new fashion as well is all these podcasts. And like I've been doing some research for work, and there are so many out there. And again, right, a lot of noise. But if we find like a niche, either just to put advertising as well as through Spotify and all those systems, but also maybe, even having a podcast to talk about all these things, just as we were talking about having conversations around the table, but also, on a podcast and putting it out there in the web, on the World Wide Web.
Hey, Peter, you want to do a podcast? Peter and I started out together 10 years ago with my doing a podcast when Peter was at the Chronicle.
I'd like to build on Andrew's blue sky for a minute. Now that I'm living closer to my daughter, I spend a fair amount of time watching football, which means I also spend a lot of time seeing commercials. How many of you can think of a commercial that you remember?
Oh, yeah.
There are so many commercials out there that stay with you. And I really think that that is something we have to think of too.
And nowadays it seems that they are putting so much effort on telling like good stories on their
Yeah. Mhm.
and that's what we're talking, right? Like those stories out there, like how we make people tell how it is to live in their shoes. So I think that definitely with
Yeah.
that storytelling.
Yeah, there's a wonderful commercial about a Chinese man who finds a stray dog. And it's quite long, as some of those are, but it stays with you because it's a story. Yeah.
Dimitri, did you have
Yeah,
something? Okay, I'm gonna mute.
Two things on that. One, I want to mention that Andrew posted the link to the On the Table process called onthetable.com, which is really the mayor process that we're talking about here and how they're having those community discussions on that. The other thing on the commercials, you mentioned football, but it's international. I was watching a commercial, I think it was from Brazil, I'm trying to remember where, and it's about these little kids that put together this Star Wars experience that you don't realize till the last moment. It's for a little girl who's deaf. And they create all these sensory things, things flying at her, whatever, while she's watching the movie, because you can't hear it. And so, I'm crying right now, just thinking about it. It was so powerful. So it's an international medium that a great story can invoke. You said, do you remember a commercial? I don't remember any commercials on a football game, but boy, do I remember that commercial. So it doesn't have to be, it's everywhere, I guess. And I'm agreeing with you, Ann, that it's a very powerful thing.
One of the places that I have been thinking about, especially, well, for their audience is NPR, National Public Radio, and community radio stations. And frequently community radio stations are even more amenable to doing things with nonprofits as a community service rather than NPR that's looking at it as a revenue source. I've dreamt for a long time of having sort of a syndicated, every month we change it, 1 minute at the top of the hour of some hour of here's a question that you can ask, try this, sort of like what our eJournal does, is just a snippet and something that you can try. Because one of the things that we talked about a lot over the past couple of meetings is people need something they can try right now to just put a toe in the water. So that it doesn't have to be you have to lead the charge for systems change globally or in your workplace, or it's going to be a threat to, because frequently in workplaces, changing systems is a threat to the status quo, but you can put a toe in. And I had been thinking that that's those kinds of things where we get to very, very quickly, succinctly tell a story, lob out a question. And so I think there's lots of different venues for that.
Could that become an extension of living room conversations, that you had them on the community radio and you just kept changing up the people?
Wow.
Yeah, that could happen.
That could be really awesome.
Yeah.
That also addresses the need for content. You were
Let's.
I think about what Beatrice was talking about, all the podcasts that are out there. Well, that means there has to be a lot of content. I mean, where is this content coming from? And some of it is good, some of it is excellent, and some of it is crap. And so there is, I think, a market, a niche, or however, from a marketing standpoint, one would look at it, a need for really meaningful stuff that people would want to come back to and listen to again and whatever. and make sure it's on. I listen to podcasts all the time riding my bike. And so, finding a podcast that really is enjoyable is something that I think is very powerful.
I'm really liking and the idea, just in general, not any specific venue, but the idea of, because podcasts are usually one or two people having conversation, but the idea of actually publicly having some of those living room conversations. There's something meaty there. I don't know what the venue is. I don't know what anything is, but there's something juicy there.
We can-
Especially given that so for folks who may be watching this now or maybe watching it at a future time, one of the true joys of being at Creating the Future is that we began, this is a strategy meeting. This is an internal strategy meeting that 99.99999% of everybody would have behind closed doors and certainly wouldn't share that information with everybody. Because this is about communications and engagement, and this is the stuff you keep secret, and we just open our doors. And the conversations are rich, the conversations are awesome. We have had, and we've been doing this since 2012. Since before there was Zoom, since there was, there was Google, and what we've found is that boards, people who find our stuff and it's on a board, and they sit on a board or they're doing board training, they've used some of our board meetings as their training. They come back later, they go, oh, they're talking about this topic. We were going to talk about this topic. And so the power of having those conversations and that's so who we are, is just open the door and have the conversation. Yeah, there's just something sparking there for me. We
Well,
lost
I
Christine.
agree with you on that. And I think what's exciting about this is that we don't want this to just be us talking to people. We want this to be a very participatory experience, and we want it to drive people to kind of carry it forward. So the more, I do think there is an advertising and straight, storytelling element to this, but I think the more things we can do that are going to get people to experience this and do something with it in a hands-on way, I think the better chance we have of having this really catch fire.
I think so too. There's there is a former techie turned social change guy, a delightful human named Jerry Michalski. And Jerry started a website about 20 years ago that he calls Jerry's Brain. And what he has tried to do with this is it's basically a mind map of anything he finds that's of interest. He posts, and then he posts all the various links around to it. Dimitri, if you find it and can post it, it's fascinating. Well, he does, I don't know if he does it regularly or whenever the mood strikes him, he does a online conversation called Inside Jerry's Brain. And they pick a topic on the okay, here, oh, let's look at that one today. And they pick a topic and they just talk about it. And it's whoever shows up. And so he may have one guest that has in particular. So let's say if he had me on and he wanted to talk about catalytic thinking. We might talk for 15 minutes, he and I, about catalytic thinking, but there'd be 20 other people in the room who just want to have that conversation. And so it is, it's very, very possible. And it's an interesting model of it.
Yeah, I agree with that, Hildy. Very interesting model. What I was thinking as well when Peter was talking is that how do we bring people that are not, they don't know much about this work, and how we engage them? What is the way of bringing them on board as well to have these conversations and this openness? How do we reach them? And that there might be where, the advertising part comes. But yeah, like all these strategies just to work together, right?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. The strategies do all need to work together. Christine is back.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I had to move. My Wi-Fi went wonky.
That happens. That happens. It is the one downside of meeting online.
Yeah.
Is that you're subject to all of that. You're really talking about, Therese, about on-ramps. What are the on-ramps into these conversations? Yeah. How do people, advertising, a big piece of what I've been thinking about is what are the ways that, because we've talked so much about the fact that people need to see examples, they need to see stories, and they need to see it in ways that resonate with them. So some of it video, some of it audio, some of it in the car, some of it podcast, some of it whatever, some of it in text. But ways to share the stories of what people are experiencing. When they ask different questions, I'll give you a very quick example, and it can be from, again, the mundane to the sublime. I was meeting yesterday again with this group that has got a very large number of employees in our community. And the CEO was saying that, and she's taken some of our classes. And she said that she has made it a practice, just as we did at the start of this meeting, as we do at the start of every meeting. We go around the room and we ask, what's been exciting in your life? And it's a good way for people to get to know each other. And she said she was going into this one group that in her mind she had been dreading. She knew this group was trouble. They are always lobbing questions at her that are antagonistic, and she's having a great deal of angst with them. And so she went into the room and she started the conversation with, let's just go around and talk for a second about what's been exciting in your life these days. And what she found was that each of them was talking about what's been exciting about the work they do. That's where they took it, which was great. And that this was a group that each individual was passionate about the work. They loved the work. And that all of the stuff they'd been lobbing at her was because they were frustrated because they saw its potential. And she said it completely shifted her. She said it didn't only shift the dynamic in the room, but it completely shifted her just by changing how she started the conversation. She said, we normally go into meetings and you just go down the agenda. She said, and just by starting it by asking, so what's been exciting in your life these days? That what she learned was that she had this completely mistaken notion, and that she had all of these judgments and all of these assumptions that she was bringing into the room with her, and they left the minute they started talking. Those are the kinds of little stories that, you're seeing, oh yeah, we have staff meetings, we could do that. And B, you're seeing this tiny little thing that you can do. How can you put a toe in? So I'm thinking about where are venues for those kinds of stories.
Building on your question, Beatrice, I would say that the first thing to do is to ask people a question. What would it look like if it were working properly? Or what is concerning you today? What is the thing that is of most interest and concern to you today? Let's talk about that. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And the point is that they don't know about the work, and probably they won't, some of them will never actually delve into catalytic thinking and figure it out. They just, what they want to know is, can we control the systems that we live in and make them better? So that if you can just say, let's talk about how that might happen, it takes it from there.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Peter started by saying, that sparking conversations that we may not even know about, that aren't, leading people back to, you have to come back to the mothership no, we would like to 10 years from now not have to do this and go on to something else.
Yes. I watched a movie years ago, and it was a science fiction movie, and they were recruiting people and doing whatever. But there was a line that they used constantly in these recruitment things. It would end with, want to know more? Want to know more? And it literally, I only watched the movie once, and that line is still stuck in my head from the way they were doing it. And so the power of a question, but also the message doesn't have to be huge to start out with. It just needs to be enticing, I think. And then where, you know, the comment, put it on billboards or put it on bus benches or put it on whatever medium it's on. I think the invitation with the question is what I think will create tremendous power. The second thing I want to mention is who else is doing this from the perspective of gatherings, meetings, you know, faith groups, service organizations, youth groups, whatever, that either the questions or the message or even tools can be incorporated in that helps build this as a movement.
Yeah, awesome. Where do each of you hear the things that stick with you and stories that stay with you? That where do you find those kinds of things in your personal lives?
I'll go for it. Right now, actually, since maybe like a year ago, I'm active on Instagram, but just as a consumer, not posting. And there is a lot of good content out there that people are putting on, and that new generations and older as well are going towards it in that social media platform, because it's visual, it's short, like it kind of runs with today's pace. And it also has the capability of images, of videos, live things. And so, you know, just putting out there one way of also engaging new audiences, and in a easy and very spread way.
I'm so glad you said that, because personally for me, I was racking my brain, which is why I was asking you all the question. I'm going to say that there are more events and places we've gone that we never would have heard of in the past 2 years, that every time Dimitri says, how did you hear of that? My answer is always Instagram. Yeah.
And because I am technologically still in the Pleistocene age, it's Facebook where I pick up all sorts of things, and where I am at this point following climate change with an incredible number of people who all over the world who are science brains beyond my capacity, and scary. So
that really raises for me, Dimitri, you mentioned who else is having these conversations. In making the link, okay, Hilda, use your words, making the link between the conversations that we want to spark and issues. So you're really talking, Anne, about an issue that people are hashtagging and they're looking for. It could be on Instagram, it could be anywhere, but so it's not about want to change conversations. It's actually the applicability of just you know, showing, not telling, showing it in practice, changing a question in those issue conversations. That's not like a conversation about conversations. Does that make sense? I'm not being very clear.
I think it is. I think what is powerful also about social media is that we don't have to rely on people going somewhere to find more information out. We can actually, if we do this well, not only show them, you know, an example or something, but prompt them or encourage them to then share something of their own or start a conversation of their own in their own networks, and kind of carry it forward and have that multiplier effect with it.
Social media definitely comes to mind for me, but it's interesting, Hilda, you said, you know, are you asking, do you want to change the conversation? And it's almost partly, do you want to have the conversation? And depending on the age of the people, the social media platform might be different. But as Peter said, if we can give people the opportunity to start the question, they can do it in the way that is comfortable for them and the platform that is comfortable for them. You know,
Very much so.
now are Instagram and Snapchat, and Facebook is still there, LinkedIn is there, but these are all things that a great number of people use regularly.
Right, right, right.
There are also a large number of alternative social media networks. They may not have the billion users that Facebook has, but it's people who've sought out alternative ways of having communication. So it sort of like pre-qualifies people in some senses. Some of these are open source, some of them are for pay, but there are a number of them that provide the same kind of platform for conversation that is just another alternative for this.
Yeah, I'm really sparking on Christina saying, encouraging people to share and start conversations on whatever platform they find themselves. And that way we don't necessarily have to be on every platform. If we're encouraging people to take this into whatever platform they happen to be on. I really like that. One of the things that I'm thinking of, I'm going back to the Beatles. And I'm missing Kishana. I know that she was having trouble. She was on her phone. I'm missing having her here. So hopefully she'll be back. I'm thinking about the influencer thing. A lot of what happens in the social change arena happens from the top down and happens from the bottom up, just like everything else. And what we're seeing now in the world of philanthropy is the bottom up has gotten so loud about how things are not working. And there has then been so much outside influence, books like Anand's book, Winners Take All, big mainstream books about how philanthropy could be better, could be more effective. That it's the top down is finally starting to listen to that. They're finally starting to have conversations about equity, about inclusion, about changing the power dynamics in philanthropy. But that didn't start with them. And normally when it starts with the top, but there are big things that happen that also start with the top. So 20 years ago, it was the measure your impact movement, and everybody started using logic models, and everybody started, we go through waves. The past 5-10 years, it's been collective impact, and all of that is top down. All of that is coming from funders, coming from United Way's top down. And so when we're talking about the influencers, when we're talking about the Beatles, that's really the realm that we're talking about. And so I think that any messages and any communications needs to spark people's attention, both from the bottom up and from the top down. And so I'm wondering, where do folks who are, and it makes me crazy. There's been I know Bridgespan has been working with 5 big foundations to basically to experiment with what would it take to start funding operations, general operations. And for me, I go, great, you're talking to 5 people. We have a universe of how many people? You're talking to 5, yay. But we do need to talk to the big guys. So what are the messages and the media that that resonate with folks that are in that place? What do they need to see? What needs to be obvious to them? The influencers.
I think we need to show them how this is beneficial to the work that they're doing, and even give them some proof points and how it'll help them be more effective.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think we can do that in part through some examples of some things that we're seeing already that are demonstrating kind of the bringing together of top down and bottom up in meaningful ways, and or are kind of inadvertent examples of catalytic thinking, right? Or catalytic,
Yeah.
So and I've written about a couple of them. I think you read the piece I did about the program officer conversation in Detroit, where a foundation in Detroit, the Fisher Family Foundation, had hired a community liaison for a community, and they called them, that the person had the word officer in their title. And immediately she was getting all these questions from the community about her title and why they use the word officer, which had a completely different connotation in the community, as a police officer, a parole officer, somebody who's there to kind of enforce rather than partner. And when she took that back to the foundation said, you know what, you're right, let's work with the community and come up with a new title. And examples like that, and kind of using that as a way to show this in action and show how these new approaches actually allow you to accomplish more and build more trust and actually reflect the communities you work in, I think could have a lot of power.
What I found myself scribbling is that it is curating stories regardless of where they come from.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of the inadvertent catalytic thinking. Catalytic thinking is not. Catalytic thinking brings together wisdom from so many different places that already exists. People are already asking effective questions. They're already doing things in ways that reach for what's possible. They are already sharing resources. They're already, and what we've done, is we've pulled all of those pieces together into a framework that is easily repeatable through questions that we ask. But it also highlights the fact that we are all very used to people or organizations that we think of as magical. Anne can do that because she's Anne. I could never accomplish that, but Anne can do it because she's Anne. And what we find is that when folks are those wonderful people, those magical people that we think are awesome and magical, what they're actually doing instinctively is the things that bring out the best in people. They are listening in certain ways. They're listening for what's possible. And again, so what catalytic thinking does is it just brings all of that stuff together to say, you can be as magical as Anne. And so I love the ability to sort of be the magnet for those stories that we hear, no matter where they're coming from. They don't have to come from us.
I would build, I think Peter's point about showing people how that fits into the work that they're doing and brings advantage to it is extremely valuable. And I would take another one because I'm way out here in outer space today. And I have good reason for it, which I will share someday. But the thing is that I'm thinking very blue sky. And I'm looking at Neil Gaiman and Jay-Z and Amy Goodman and Trevor Noah. And I'm thinking every one of these people is having this conversation. Why are we not joining their conversation?
Wow. Yeah.
A rapper started somewhere really important and rose up because he rapped. If we listen to what the rap is saying, we're going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
And I actually think some of the examples we curate and share and show can be things completely outside of the world we're in, and can be an artist, or it could be a civil rights leader from the 60s or whatever, somebody who has really transformed something in a really powerful way, and get the reasons behind why, and use that as a piece of inspiration for this. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I love it.
I want to get in the audience and ask Trevor Noah a question, because the answers we will get will be astonishing. And he is an activist in thinking, and I think that it's very available.
And pretty adorable too.
Yes. Not to mention
if we're,
Really funny.
if we're going to, yeah, we're going to go there.
So I want to throw a loaded question out there.
Yay.
So we're kind of all coming at this from a very similar worldview. I don't want to assume the politics or kind of the ideology of anybody in this room, but we're in a pretty divided country right now where there's a large percentage of the population that is getting and discussing information in completely different networks than the other camp. So there's two different realities in this world. How do we bridge that? Do we try to bridge that? Do we try to make this something that kind of crosses both those worlds, or do we just try to bring along the likely converts first?
I'm going to jump in on that one because it's been in my brain a lot, and it relates to what Andrew mentioned. It is where my thinking for the past month or so has been. We're all in our cars. The great equalizer of where do we access, because it is almost impossible to broadly talk to folks who are not in your same political camp, so to speak, on social media, because the silos have just gotten so structured that most people don't go outside of their structure. And quite honestly, the algorithms on Facebook, they're not going to show you stuff that you're not participating in. So it makes it even more siloed. And the thought that had occurred to me was that one way of reaching across the aisle is everybody sees a billboard. You know, everybody's listening to the radio. And music. I'm not talking about you know, listening to NPR or listening to talk radio. I'm talking about, you know, everybody's either listening to country music or listening to rock and roll or listening to rap. Very, very much, Peter, thinking about where are the places where everybody is, and what are the messages that resonate regardless of what side of the aisle you're on.
Football.
We're back to football. You're right. You're right.
That's something that, you know, in the world of fundraising that my team and I would always say was, you got to love them where they're at, and they're going to be at a million different places. And
Yeah.
But Peter, were you asking, should we try to approach the right-wing media, the media that the people that we are seeing on the other side of a divide, the things that they are listening to?
That's the question I'm asking, because and if so, the message has to be framed in a different way, and the examples have to be different. It doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, I'm a big believer that there's a lot of commonality across both of these things, but there are certain triggers that immediately either turn somebody on or turn somebody off to an idea based on their, you know, where they're consuming and what they're consuming. So, you know, do we need to think about this, you know, as a bifurcated message in some ways? I mean, you know, yeah, we all listen to music, but you know, some of us are listening to NPR and some of us are listening to Rush Limbaugh, and you know, it's, you know, and maybe even I think the people that are listening to a hip hop station are going to have different beliefs than those who listen to country, possibly.
Yeah.
So, you know, thinking about how we want to frame the message differently.
Yeah. And it's why I'm loving coming back to questions, because the questions, if questions are aimed at bringing out the best in people, then those questions are going to resonate regardless of, you know, when I am doing keynotes and I need to really whittle this down into, I've got an audience, I don't know who's the audience. I've got, you know, 500 people who may share an occupation, and the occupation may not be anything that we normally work with. It could, and they could be across the spectrum. And I whittle catalytic thinking down into 3 questions that resonate with absolutely anybody. 1, what do we really want? What's at the end of the rainbow? Not what are we going to do? Not, you know, we want to raise money. What do we really want? What kind of world do you want? What kind of, and The second question being, who else cares about that? What does it take for us to link arms together with people who care about that? And what do we have together that we can build on? And what I find is that those three questions resonate regardless of what side of what aisle somebody is on. And if the other piece is, and we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, there's a piece of the catalytic listening practice that is called the continuum of potential. And the continuum is a practice that acknowledges that everyone is at a different stage of reaching for their own potential. Stages of change, stages of readiness to step into their potential. And some people want tips and tools, and some people are stuck, and some people are, I'm going to dive in and change my whole life. And it could be about anything. It could be about getting more healthy. It could be about getting a new job. It could be about absolutely anything. And we're all at different stages depending on the thing. So, you know, I could be at one stage, I could be at the diving in stage of my professional life, and in the I am stuck and have been stuck for 20 years on something in my personal life. It is occurring to me that at that point of reaching for our potential to bring out the best in each other, the target audience for us, we need to define the target audience of the state of readiness of somebody to hear the message. Do we want to spend a lot of time on people who are going to argue that this bringing out the best in people bullshit is just another snowflakey okay, no. Do I want to spend my time arguing? And no. Do we want to, you know, I'm loving what you said, Christina. I frequently talk about we go where the water's warm. Is that a place to start the conversations and hope that they'll ripple out? Some of what we talked about over the past several meetings is that every one of what we want our messages to be are sort of the stone in the pond, and we want them to ripple, and we want, as Peter was saying earlier, for those conversations to ripple. So I'm thinking that it's not so much the political jargon, but the kinds of language that people who are really ripe for putting a toe in to change, whether it's their workplace system, whether it's whatever, that's where we probably want to play, is people who are ready to hear the message. There's not the convincing part, but the people who's ready to hear it.
And on top of that, we want to be able to approach them with a way in which they can hear it. One of the things about the Dalai Lama Desmond Tutu book is the way in which the title is framed. I don't know that it would be a bestseller, and it is a bestseller, if it had just been a dialogue with two spiritual leaders of the 20th century. But it's framed with how to find joy in troubled times. It's a very general concern, and people want to know the answer.
Yeah, Andrew just asked the question, one question related to this part of the conversation. What if different people and groups have wildly divergent ideas of what bringing out the best in people means, and they are at odds with each other? Yeah. And my answer to that generally is to ask the question, what do you think is the best in people? And engage that conversation. When you see people at their best, what are you seeing that you would label as at their best? And I have asked that question in rooms where people ask that question. And it is interesting that we all have this same sort of notion of what that looks like. So at that highest, again, the question of what do we really want? Do you want to be angry? Do you want to be joyful? Most of us are not choosing anger. But I do think that that's, again, fuel for a message. Because there's a lot of people, I mean, I'm thinking about the holiday table. I'm thinking about how many people are thinking with trepidation about going into the holidays and being with family. And the arguments that will arise. And so many, I mean, every year, our eJournal has at least 2 articles on using, in essence, catalytic thinking. What are some questions you can ask at the holiday table that will create joy at the holiday table? So I think they're really powerful questions. I think it's really important to include that in the message. To include Andrew's point in the message is what do people look like when they're at their best? Where do you see that? I love that.
What is common ground? And that's the question that comes to my mind. You know, what is common ground? And you know, immediate thought that comes to mind is, I watch the cooking channel. It's hard to be, you know, to feel angry at the cooking channel. I mean, you know, it's great food. It's how to cook. We all cook. We all have to eat. So it doesn't matter what your political viewpoint is. You know, you may personally cook or not cook, but you know, even if your political viewpoint is way different than mine, you can enjoy a great roast or a souffle or a whatever. Because we all eat. So I think finding common ground is really important to maybe be a starting point for the message or messages, knowing that everyone would be attracted to it.
Yeah. I'm reflecting on, so years ago when I did my podcast, one of the guests that I had was Carol Rasko. And Carol was the domestic policy advisor to Bill Clinton when he was president. And regardless of what somebody thinks of the Clintons, during the Clinton era, there was a lot of domestic policy passed in a time where the Congress hated the president and impeached him. And yet they passed so much domestic policy. And I asked her, how did you do that? You were constantly walking into rooms with both houses of Congress hating your guts. And her answer, which resonated, and I still repeat it how many years later, was, I saw my only job when I walked into a room is finding what everybody had in common. And I knew there was something there, and that was my job, was to find it. And so maybe those are the kinds of messages, maybe those are the kinds of questions and messages among them, yeah.
Really good place to start one of those living room conversations. Yeah.
I love the question, what are you seeing when people are at their best? I'm going to start that one on Facebook today. I'm very excited. I want to get back to the influencers. Where are they getting their information from? Where are they finding the brain fodder for their going? That's intriguing. Who do we see as influencers? Maybe that's a question. In addition to Trevor Noah and Jay-Z.
I think Bill Gates, I see him all the time on some of the things that he puts on LinkedIn are just absolutely wonderful at getting people to really think about something and get in on a conversation.
Yeah. Who are the people that when you see them, you say, ooh, I want to find out what he's thinking. Or she's thinking, or they're thinking. I will tell you one influencer that is growing in his influence, and I'm excited about, is Vu Le. And in the nonprofit world, Vu is kicking butt and taking names. And the exciting news is that on this past Monday, he joined our board. So that's fun. But Vu is another one with that voice that people are listening to.
Where does he talk mostly? Is it in social media, or is it, where can we find him?
He blogs. His blog has, at last I spoke with him about it, which was several months ago, has over 30,000 subscribers to his blog, which is huge, which is absolutely huge. And then it's shared a lot in other places.
It's called Nonprofit AF.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Used to be called Nonprofits with Balls, but he changed the.
Yeah, it wasn't graphic enough. He is a hoot.
So I want to just throw in Greta Thunberg as
Mhm.
an
Mhm.
influencer.
Mhm. I also think that if we're talking specifically in the social change arena, the current reality is whether you're a social enterprise and looking at venture funding, or you are a traditional nonprofit and you're looking at grants, that people with money tend to be who a lot of people listen to. So if there is an article someplace by a large foundation, whether it's a large foundation in a community or a large foundation, the Ford Foundation, a lot of people know what's going on with the Ford Foundation, and the fact that their director has decided to blow things up and to try different things. And the only reason we're paying attention to that is because it's the Ford Foundation. So I think that regardless of whether we think that's appropriate or not, that the only people that people listen to are people with money, I think it's a reality that large influential, and that's why they're listening to Bill Gates. If Bill Gates was just a guy in a tech company, they wouldn't be listening to him. But I think that's yeah. So large philanthropists, angel funders, investors. And where are they getting their information from? What are they repeating? Where are they getting the stuff they repeat?
I wanted to mention before getting into that question, like AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is also, like becoming a big influencer, and like Bernie Sanders as well, like all the activity that they have in social media, it's putting a lot of issues out there that maybe they weren't there before, or they weren't as spread.
Yes. Yep.
They're getting their information from the publications that they read as well, and also from the people with whom they consort.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering about
We cannot hear you.
Dimitri, you're muted.
Dimitri, we cannot hear you.
Yeah, both you and Hildy are muted right now.
So if we are talking about, I'm thinking about universities. So that's sort of where you sparked for me is universities. And oh yeah, my brain just exploded all over.
We missed everything that Dimitri said.
Yes, and your brain is exploding, so now we
Yeah.
missed something huge.
Dimitri was talking about teachers as influencers, educators as influencers. So he not only muted me, he muted himself, and then he went,
And they went
fascinating.
brilliant. I mean, come on.
he's fascinating when he's not talking.
It creates curiosity. You know, what's he talking about?
Exactly. And her head's exploding and I don't know what's going on. But talking about educators as influencers. And what that's leading me to is the number of, so in a very narrow sense, and then broadening it out, we've been partnering with Arnova. Arnova is the Association for Research on Nonprofit and Voluntary Action. And they are primarily university professors teaching either in public administration, in nonprofit management, in sociology, but it is primarily academics and scholars in the nonprofit and voluntary action sphere. And thinking about the influence that folks like that have on, quote, this is just the way we do things. And that's systems. So when we're looking at systems change, a lot of what I've been writing about recently is the fact that so many of the systems that we use for social change actually thwart social change. So things like competitive funding that pit people against each other who should be linking arms together. Those kinds of systems that we're also used to that become, that's the way we do things. And then we get really, really good at doing things in that way. Those influencers of having them ask different questions and see that through a different lens, that's really, that's what it sparked for me as you were talking, Dimitri.
Mm-hmm.
But again, where are those folks? Where are they hearing of stuff that they're finding credible enough to repeat? So I'm thinking of places like Harvard Business Review. I'm thinking of places like Stanford Social Innovation Review. I'm thinking those kinds of and Andrew just noted that Vu is our only celebrity in nonprofit world. So where are the places where they're finding, where are they paying attention to that they're finding credible enough to share? Because whoever it was said that it's the publications that they read and then they're sharing with their peers what they hear from their peers. Where are the places that they're saying, did you see that? Did you hear this? Where are those places?
I'm going to try it again. Education conferences. I'm just thinking that, you know, the folks get together and they share the latest whatever. And those might be places, and there's hundreds of them that go on all over. So those might be sort of hubs to get to many educators at the same time.
Is there an easy way to ask them? Is there, you indicated that you work with a group. Is there a way to reach out to them easily and say, really
Great.
curious about this?
Great idea. Yeah, yeah. Other influencers. I love the idea of conferences, and again, not just in educators, but there's, you know, foundations. If we're talking about philanthropists, if we're talking about where are the movers and shakers?
If you're talking about corporate leadership, you're definitely talking about conferences.
Yeah.
And the other thing I love about your educator conferences, Dimitri, is of course the fact that working as much as I do with elementary schools and in rural districts, anything that can help a rural school teacher think there's a possibility of improving the system is something that they really want to hear. So
You brought up corporate leaders.
yeah.
Talk about influencers.
Yeah.
And even if all they influence is what's going on within their corporation, that's huge.
Well, and there's always Aspen every summer. I'll get you to Colorado,
I
yeah.
was gonna say. Yeah, where do we need to be sparking these conversations? So for those of you, I know that Peter and Christina and Beatrice, that you live in the world of marketing, communications, PR. Are there venues, activities, tactics that frequently arise that we haven't played with, explored, touched on, that you'd go, oh yeah, there's that?
We haven't, there are a few things. We haven't talked at all about earned media, you know, where you have earned, paid, and owned media. Owned media are things like your blog or your podcast and your social media channels. Paid media is obviously advertising. Earned media is getting media placements, you know, getting your story told in the newspaper or on television. I mean, we've talked around it a little bit, but I think, and you've brought up a few outlets that'll be useful, but I think a central piece of what we ultimately put together for this is going to focus on, you know, how do we get you and others and get these examples out into the media in a more thoughtful way.
Oh yeah. Stories about this.
Stories about this, stories, you know, op-eds, you know, guest pieces, things like that. Is there a TED Talk in your future? Things like that, you know, stuff where we can, you know, use other platforms to be talking about this and get that third-party validation for it.
Right. Other people's rooms. And I love that third-party validation. That's huge.
Like, for example, as well, being a guest blogger in somebody else's blog, just to continue talking about that.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm also wondering, and I would ask this question to folks who do this. I know that there are conference planning folks who plan these conferences and who find speakers and so on. I'm assuming there is conference planner conferences, so that you have a way of getting to all these people at the same time. So I'm wondering if that might be a venue as well.
There definitely are people that is exactly what they do. I know quite a few of them. So if you'd like me to get them in touch with you, I could certainly help you with that.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Great. And then there's also, on top of that, there's speakers bureaus where, you know, it's essentially agents for speakers. There could be opportunities through some kind of arrangement there too.
Right. Anything else that we haven't talked about? And I'll share with y'all that the next step in this really is going to be a matrix. Looking at objective criteria upon which we want to weigh which of these do we actually do, because there's a million ideas here, is looking at objective criteria and then weighting each of these against that objective criteria to see what bubbles up to the top, because all of these are awesome. And if we had a team of 100 people, we would happily do all of these. But are there other ideas that we haven't talked about that make sense?
Can you just review, because I know you've been taking notes, can you just review some of those so that'll help spark?
Yep. Okay, and I'm on. Good. All right. We started out by talking about social media and encouraging people to share conversations on their own social media. So not just throwing out a link, and having a conversation, but encouraging people to bring that to their own social media. We talked a lot about living room conversations, about creating tools, questions for living room conversations, as well as doing living room conversations live, which is just very intriguing. We talked about podcasts. We talked about all kinds of advertising, billboards, radio. We talked about specific kinds of radio, but generally under the advertising category. We talked about on the table for community conversations. We talked a lot about encouraging people to spark their own conversations on whatever platform they happen to be on. Then we started talking about influencers. We were talking about articles in periodicals. We talked about Harvard Business Review in them. We talked about conferences. Christina suggested to ask Arnovo, where do you get stuff that you would actually share and repeat with people? Which I think is just a brilliant question for in general, which I'm loving. Anne suggested Aspen. Yes, I will come see you.
Me too.
I'll bring Dimitri. And then we talked about earned media, the third-party validation of guest pieces, op-eds, stories about what works, etc.
I want to circle back to something that I mentioned before, and I'm thinking of it in the context of Peter's comment in terms of divisiveness, cultural divisiveness that's going on, and that is faith-based groups. Yeah, when you ask the question, we want to bring out the best in people, that sort of seems like their domain, and that could be my bias in thinking about that. And there's such a huge range of those. And then there's within those, there's subgroups. So there's youth groups within those. There's, just such a variety of things. But I think it covers a huge expanse of our sort of awareness. And I think that this would be a really good venue for that.
Yes. Talking about influencers. I mean, that's huge. The pulpit is just, yeah. Wow.
Unitarians and the temples are already having some of these
Very much
conversations.
so. Very much so. I
um,
think a lot of people are having these conversations.
Yeah. So, okay, well, I've come up with my assignment.
All righty then.
You're going to help me by giving me the questions. I'm going to start having living room conversations to get to know the people in the arts in my new town. There are many of them. And it will gradually fade into questioning the systems that support the arts and how those might be improved. And I've just Googled to find the name of the local radio station. So this will move from my living room to the radio. That's my assignment.
Okay.
I'm done.
I'm feeling like this is a solid list. So Andrew is asking, this feels like a very uncatalytic thinking question to ask, but where does the money come from for whatever activities are chosen to move forward with? It is remarkable that we never let that be the question. And I'll share with you, and again, coming back, I want to share the screen again to the graphic of catalytic thinking. We come up with all kinds of actions, and then we will ask internally, because we asked externally, what do people need to know? What do they need to feel? What do they need to experience? We come up with actions that will create those conditions for others. And then we ask, what are our conditions for success? What do we need to have? Who do we need to know? Who do we need to be able to connect with? And what is remarkable in that asking, we also get to ask, who else is doing stuff like this? Who else is doing pieces of this that we might partner with? And that is the whole collective enoughness piece, that together we have everything we need, that it's only on our own that we experience scarcity. And one of the things that we will be doing, just as an example of that in the coming year, is we will be looking for several administrative positions that we have not had here at Creating the Future. Being small and scrappy and in proof of concept and all volunteer for a long time, you don't have an administrative assistant, you don't have a bookkeeper. Well, you do. You have me, and then you have me, and then you have Dimitri, and then you have me, and you have a lot of volunteers. You have Anne. You have, I mean, we have a huge core of volunteers, but we need some functions that are going to be consistent and steady and done. And the first question we ask ourselves is, who else has that? And can we partner with them? And immediately you think of so many of, we don't, you know, when it comes to an administrative assistant, you don't need somebody full-time. If it's 10 hours a week, it's a lot. If it's 5 hours a week, it's a lot. Are there people we already know who have administrative assistants who would say, 5 hours, we've got that. We've absolutely got that. We can partner, and it'll be, you know, either we've had the experience where people either say, oh, it's a drop in the bucket, we're already doing it. We love you and we'll do that. Or it'll cost you X per hour. And again, when we've done this in the past, we did this to build the first diaper bank, when we built the diaper bank. What we found is that there were some people who said, yeah, we'll just do it. That's an easy part. And there's some people that we specifically said, we want to bid, and don't bid us what it would cost if we went to market, because we could just go to market. We want a partner. We don't want a transaction. And it builds these beautiful relationships. Who is out there who already has bookkeepers? Oh, I'm going to guess a lot of people. Can your bookkeeper do 3 hours of work a month? Oh, yeah. And it's a very different question. So it could be, Andrew, something like, and I'm just pulling stuff out of the air. It could be somebody like an organization that's got 6 people who do social media. To ask them, if we give you content, would you be responsible for? And you know, and I'm just making stuff up, but it's first asking the question, who's already doing things, and then it's prioritizing. If this is what our budget is, what is the highest priority thing that we need to be doing? It could be that something becomes so important that we say, we're going to raise money for that. We're going to crowdfund for that. We're going to, but we very intentionally make that the last question, not the first question, because that is an absolute creativity killer. Yeah, and so I'm glad you asked it. I'm really, really, really glad you asked it, because I got to go off on collective enoughness. I'm feeling like we have covered like tremendous ground. Peter, are there questions? That Peter and I have been talking about this and talking about partnering together and playing together for a long time on this. And is there anything that's occurring to you that I didn't ask, that we didn't talk about, that and Christina, you as well, Beatrice, you as well, in your professional roles? Are there questions you would ask that we don't seem to be asking that we missed? Did we miss anything big?
Having been on, I don't know how many hours worth of these calls, I think we've asked all the questions.
Please, no more questions. I beg of you, no more questions.
Well, I haven't been on hours worth of the calls, and it seems to me like a lot has been addressed. So
I was going to say the same. In my mind, it seems that, yeah, everything has been covered. But, you know, if anything else sparks, definitely we will share. But
Awesome.
this has been a great conversation. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Well, then I will ask, and Andrew, I'd love yours as well for reflections. First, let's take a deep breath. This has been one of those conversations you need a deep breath. If you've taken any notes, if you'll look them over, if there's anything that stood out to you in the conversation, anything that you're going to take out with you and be noodling on, or you know that in the shower you're going to have a big revelation, or just anything that's standing out for you from the conversation. Let's just take a moment and sort of sum up our reflections.
I'm gonna stay with the bring the best in people, and that question that what do you see when you are at your best, or when you see that people are at their best? I want to continue believing that that is possible, that, you know, like for as many divisive issues that we face with different people, that there's always that common ground. And that is what I'm always gonna kind of fight for, to find that. And that idea that Christina also shared, you know, like find them where they are, love them where they are, because we all have something to offer. And I want to believe that with more information and more connection as humans, we can get there. And it is that, bringing the best in people.
I love it. I'm so glad you were here.
I agree. I wrote and circled and put lots of little notes around common ground, because I think that at the end of the day, it all comes down to everyone wants to be heard. Everyone wants to feel special. And there are a lot of opportunities to bridge so that people are able to celebrate the things that are common.
Oh, I love to celebrate. Love that word. I'm so pleased that you joined us. I really, really am.
Thank you. I'm very glad I did as well.
What else is standing out to y'all?
What is standing out to me is the fact that is to build on Beatrice's beautiful statement earlier about the coordination and comprehension of actual action steps from here, that there's an interrelationship to almost all of the ideas we've had. And the thing that I like best about them is that there are concrete steps of action that can be taken now.
I love that. Yes. Yeah. I'm the power of all of it working together is really exciting. And I can't wait to come visit you in Colorado. Peter, how about you?
I don't know if I have much more to add beyond what's already been brought up as highlights. I want to kind of take a step back. I know we're talking again next week and kind of think about how all this fits together, but there's a lot, so many great ideas.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It has been a joy to be walking this path together, and this just makes me happy. Andrew's reflection was, how do we meet people where they are? Big. Really, really, really big. I am so grateful, Andrew, that you were able to be part of this. Wonderful. Dimitri, how about you? What's standing out to you?
I watch a lot. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one of the podcasts I listen to, I've been listening to it for years. They were like one of the people that started the whole thing. And they do their podcast, and at the end of the podcast, they put the, whatever it's called in the industry, the little tag that names the episode. So after the episode's over, then for the replay, they call it episode 347, and it has a name. So if I was to name this episode, it's Find the Beatles. That in terms of what I'm sort of taking away from this. And the comment that Christina was talking about, the generational stuff, which really, when you think about it, the divisiveness doesn't exist to the same degree as you get younger and younger and younger. There's more shared than not. I think it's really, that I'm taking away is the importance of making sure that part of this message addresses folks at all ages, not just strata, but ages of society. So that's my takeaway here. And find the Beatles.
I get to be George.
Please don't be George. I'd like you to be around. My reflection is the joy of having so many different voices in the room. I'm sorry for the people who weren't at the last minute able to be here, dropped off the call, but we've had pretty much different people in the room each time. And I've really been thinking a lot lately about, because I'm a writer by nature, about writing a piece on the value that we have found as an organization of opening the door and just inviting people in. And it's just been so joyful. And having all of you here, we couldn't have done this on our own. I mean, we could have done some of it, but having everybody's brain coming from a different perspective, and I do love that what we're talking about here is having two-way conversations so that we're constantly feeding different perspectives into it. Different ages, different ethnicities, different abilities, different all of that, feeding that in and going, oh, wow, we were totally blind spotting on that. We did not see that. And you only get that by opening the door and inviting people to bring their whole selves in. And I can't tell you all how grateful I am. It's been pretty remarkable to be in all these conversations, and we'll see what happens, but you're going to be involved from there on. Thank you all, and we will see you next time. To be continued.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.